Could we please all find our seats? The May board meeting is called to order, and welcome all. I'd like to begin today by expressing my personal and on behalf of the MTA family and our board, deep sadness and offer condolences to all those in Manchester, England, victims of the attacks. If we could all pause now in a moment of silence and remember those victims and recall that we live in an uncertain place at an uncertain time. Thank you. I'd like to recognize some extraordinary members of the MTA family, three of whom are here with us today. MTA PD officers Desire Bokor, Armando Hernandez, and Metro North Assistant Conductor Charles Dolan, and Metro North Conductor Sean Tedesco couldn't be with us today. Last month, these MTA employees worked together to reunite a missing nonverbal autistic teen with his family. Conductors Tedesco and Dolan knew instantly that a boy on their train who couldn't communicate and avoided eye contact should not have been traveling alone and, in fact, needed help. So they immediately arranged to have MTA PD officers meet the train in Stanford. MTA PD officers Bokor and Hernandez coaxed the young man off the train, brought him to a safe place, and worked with patience and empathy to convince the boy to give them a key fob with a crucially important piece of information, an address in Queens and a phone number. Officer Bokor called the number and reached the boy's mother, who is also here with us today, Sui Chen Chung, who was inside a NYPD police car patrolling the neighborhood in search of her son. Officers Bokor and Hernandez then drove the boy back to his home in Queens to reunite him with his mother, whose brother, incidentally, is an MTA bus driver. So Officers Bokor and Hernandez and Conductor Dolan, would you please join us all in the front of the boardroom? Yes. Officers, thank you for your patient work to reunite a missing boy with his family. And Conductor Dolan, thank you for immediately recognizing a potentially disastrous situation and calling for help. And now, as a small token of our appreciation, please join me, Ronnie. I want to...
We're going to go on the other side.
Okay. I want to present these plaques to you to express not only our appreciation, but the appreciation of the riding public. You did your job, you did it well, and it's another success story. Thank you. Officer Bokor. And Officer Hernandez. Let me... Thank you again. Mr. Morello, do we have any members of the public who have registered to speak and are in the room? I know that's a silly question. Would you please announce them?
Indeed we do, Mr. Chairman. We have 28 speakers signed up so far. First-timers, I would advise you that so that we can treat everyone equitably and so the board can also conduct its other business, we limit individual public speakers to 2 minutes. And in order to be able to get through our agenda and to hear everyone today, we're going to have to try to stick to that 2-minute limit. So as you approach the end of your 2-minute period, you'll hear various sound effects. You'll hear if you're planning to speak, you'll hear various sound effects advising you that your 2-minute time period is approaching the end. So as I said, so that we can hear everyone, so that we can be fair to everyone, we ask you all to stick to or try to stick to that 2-minute limit. I'll remind you when you're going over that you'll have to wrap up. Our first speaker is Tony Murphy. He'll be followed by Teresa Gutierrez. Mr. Murphy. Morning.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tony Murphy. I'm with Workers' World Party. We're a socialist group, workers' rights and anti-racist, and we were concerned last week when we saw that there was a union veteran who was arrested. Apparently he didn't let somebody in the gate fast enough. Whether that person is a member of the NYPD or a member of the writing public, we think it's quite ridiculous that somebody didn't get buzzed in when they wanted to and got arrested and is facing 3 criminal charges. We think that those charges should be dropped. I have signs, as do the people who came with me, and we would like to say that if the NYPD wants to pursue criminals, it can start within its own ranks, with Daniel Pantaleo, Richard Haste, and Peter Liang for the killings of Eric Garner, Marley Graham, and Akai Gurley. We would also like to say that broken windows policing itself is a crime. That's the sign that I have today. Broken windows policing, of course, is arresting people for petty violations like having an open container or riding a bike on a sidewalk or loitering. And of course, the people who are mainly arrested at a rate of 90% are black and Latino. Broken windows policing is a racist policy, really an extension of stop and frisk, and we think that that is a crime. Also, the various ways that broken windows is manifested in the subway, we think that's a crime. That's the real crime. Plainclothes officers who wait for so-called fare beaters and then drag them off to jail or give them summonses. That's a crime. We also think that the fact that the fare constantly goes up while subway service gets worse and worse is a crime. I used to live in the Parkchester section of the Bronx, which had an elevated subway with no elevator.
You're going to have to wrap up, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, I will. No elevator, and it broke my heart to see elderly people or people with disabilities struggle up the escalator when it was broken, or even just people with baby carriages. I think that's a crime, and I think we're going to hear a lot more about that today. Our message is to drop these charges and go after the real crimes, start with broken windows policing and the deplorable state of the subway service, which is not serving its ridership, especially riders with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I didn't hear too much about your stated topic of the MTA budget, but I would ask other speakers that they try to address their remarks to MTA topics, in particular board agenda topics. Teresa Gutierrez will be followed by Taryn Fivick. Ms. Gutierrez.
Good morning. Whatever time I do not take, as an able-bodied person, I want my minute to be turned over to those that are fighting for access from the MTA. I'm very struck by the fact that you opened up this morning recognizing what happened in Manchester, and I too am very saddened by the loss of children, especially. they are casualties of war, and we must mourn the loss. But I wonder if an MTA board meeting ever opened up mourning the loss of Eric Gardner or other forces or other people who were also taken down by war. And I am also here not to talk about the budget, but it is related, because money should not be spent to have charges or to fire a worker who was fired last week and who has now lost his job because of not opening doors fast enough. So I'm here to tell MTA that they should drop the charges for this brother who I consider a hero. There are other priorities for the MTA to be working on, which is providing better services for all of us, lowering the cost. We shouldn't pay the brunt of profit for the MTA. And as an able-bodied person, in addition to standing here and demanding that this worker who was fired last week, in addition to demanding to MTA that they drop the charges, I also want to stand here with my sisters and brothers who are fighting against Access a Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Taryn Fivic, or Fivic. If I got it wrong, I apologize.
Fivic, that's fine. Good morning, everyone. My name's Taryn Fivic. I'm from the New York City Workers' Defense Committee. There's still a lot that we don't know about the arrest of the station agent that the previous two speakers have spoken on. Most of the media accounts of what went down were by officials, police sources, and court documents, meaning that the word of the NYPD was paramount in this situation. That's a source that the people of New York have definitely learned to distrust. What we do know is that this union brother was arrested, suspended without pay, and is facing 3 criminal charges. The last 2 charges, the obstruction of governmental justice, assaulting a police officer, and resisting arrest. The last 2 charges are familiar to anyone following the Black Lives Matter movement. They are used against any black or brown person attacked by police. Bill de Blasio likes to talk about how this is a sanctuary city, and we all know that that's not true. We know that broken windows policing results in the deportation of people for just jumping a turnstile or riding their bike on the sidewalk. So I would encourage people to stand with our union brother here as he faces these charges for doing something that we don't even know exactly why he did it, but it's ridiculous that he would be charged with this. So please drop all the charges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Taekwon Sells, and then Nate Peters, and then John Steffen.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm going to keep my comments very brief. I'm a member of the New York City Workers' Defense Committee, and we are asking that all charges be dropped against the 27-year-old Union veteran who did not open his gate fast enough for a police officer to enter through to pursue a suspect. Also, we think it is a travesty that the MTA budget does not include enough money for stations to have elevators so these people could get on the train, because they shouldn't have to take the slow-ass bus everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nate Peters, then John Steffen, then Brittany Wilson.
Hello, MTA Board, members of the community. I'm here to speak on behalf of Workers' World Party about the arrest last week of a 27-year veteran of the MTA. This is unacceptable that a person was arrested for allegedly not opening a gate fast enough for the police, particularly given that the police all have Metro cards. They don't need anybody to open the gate for them. I mean, this is ridiculous. What's also ridiculous is that between January 1st and February 12th, over 4,000 people were arrested in the system for allegedly jumping the turnstile. 90% of those are black and brown. That is so racist. How is that kind of racism tolerated in our city? How does every person on this board who represents the public transit system of this city for its citizens tolerate that? How is that acceptable? Can anyone explain to me how that is acceptable? I know some members of the board have been demanding more statistics from the NYPD on this matter. I would ask that we have sufficient statistics to conclude that the NYPD's policies in the subway and around New York City are incredibly racist and unacceptable. We need the pigs out of the subway. They're not there to protect us. They're not there to keep us safe. They're there to arrest people, to lock them up, and to support broken windows policing, which is a disgusting policy that benefits this city in no way whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peters. John Steffen, then Brittany Wilson, and then Ronald Smith.
Hi, everyone. I'll be brief. I'm here with Workers' Defense Committee to stand in solidarity with the 27-year-old veteran of the MTA, and I encourage everyone in this room to also stand in solidarity because, as my comrades have said, we don't know the details, and yet he has already been punished. We don't know the details. The police's word has been taken as good. There are 3 charges against him, which another person has already read: obstruction of government justice, assaulting a police officer, and resisting arrest. We've seen the videos of people who are being beaten by the cops while the cops yell at them, "Stop resisting." It's absolutely absurd, and we should not trust the account as it stands. There should be it should be looked into further before someone is punished. But we're also here to stand for or stand against the real crimes, which is the broken windows policing, and people get arrested for fare beating. That's part of this policy, and these are people who are trying to go to doctor's appointments. These are people who are going on the job hunt, to get the money so that they can pay the subway fares, the increasing subway fares. It's absolutely ridiculous that these people are punished for things that they shouldn't be punished. So we're here to take a stand against that, and we hope everyone stands in solidarity with the 27-year-old veteran of the MTA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brittany Wilson, good morning. To be followed by Ronald Smith and then Timothy Lunsford.
Good morning. My name is Brittany Wilson. I'm a civil rights attorney and a 16-year user of Accessoride. I've been using the system since I was 11 years old. I'm here to discuss 3 major barriers to Accessoride functioning as a comparable and efficient service for the elderly and disabled in New York who are unable to use the city's largely inaccessible transit system. The first of those issues is routing. Whenever you call to schedule a ride for Accessoride, they advise you to please be outside at your scheduled pickup time and to allow the driver 30 minutes for traffic or delay. The truth is, most of the time, that traffic or delay is not because of New York City traffic, it's because of routes. If any one of you able-bodied users of public transportation wanted to get from where I live in Brooklyn to your job in Lower Manhattan, as I do every day, you would get on the train and take the train to Broadway Lafayette. You would not go to 42nd Street and then come back down to Broadway Lafayette. Yet I do this daily. I also get taken to Queens, Astoria, the other side of Brooklyn, so a lot of the delay that Accessoride tells you to prepare for is actually self-made delay. Second, the lack of direct communication between drivers and passengers. If an Accessoride user has a problem affecting his or her ride, or if someone wants to know if their ride is late, they have to call transit, who then has to call a dispatcher. We live in an age where I can track my Uber ride and know exactly where it is, and yet for some reason I still have to sit outside for an Accessoride that may not be anywhere in my vicinity. We also have a taxi authorization system in Accessoride that if your ride is more than 30 minutes late, you can be reimbursed for your fare, but the problem with this system is that it only privileges professionals like me, unfortunately, who can afford to do that, and reimbursement sometimes comes 2-3 months down the line. And if the MTA was really interested in people with disabilities being able to get to their destinations on time, they would, for example, contract the taxi drivers to allow those taxis to be reimbursed by the MTA rather than requiring passengers to ask the MTA for reimbursement themselves. Finally, I basically made my point about having to wait outside for a ride, but if a dispatcher knows that an Accessoride is running significantly behind schedule, there's no reason that a passenger should have to wait outside for that ride. Yesterday, for example, I received a courtesy call and was told that I could go back inside because my ride was still on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn, but the problem is that's not a regular occurrence. I only received that courtesy call because I filed about 7,000 complaints, including one the day before, and that should instead be a regular service. Accessoride is a service for the elderly and disabled. These are the people who are in the least position to be able to wait outside on busy city street corners for rides for hours on end. And I think the MTA needs to do something to address this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Ronald Smith. Good morning.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Alan Timothy Lunsford Stevens. I'm 61 and I'm profound deaf, and I need a hearing service dog. In 2014, I had a surgical reconstruction of my left, and the subways since then have made my life a nightmare. To this day, I have had excruciating pain in my foot and knees and can't climb stairs very well. I need an elevator to use the subway. The nearest subway to my home, Christopher Street, lacks one. For 2 years, I had to see a surgeon and still visit physical therapists. I also see doctors for my GI, urology, my ears, my immune system, my lungs, and my heart. And they're all over the city, from Union Square to downtown to 42nd Street to Langone, Newark University, where I get regular chemotherapy. The nearest elevator stations for me are 14th Street and 7th Avenue at Zeckendorf Towers. Both are a schlep. When elevators exist, they often do not work for months, but you can always count on them to stink. I carry a spray used in toilets in my backpack since the smell makes me want to throw up. Literally, should subway elevators smell like toilets? No. When I use the subways to get to my doctors, I'm often late, and sometimes I've actually missed a couple of appointments. The American Disabilities Act was passed with great fanfare 27 years ago. The MTA breaks both the letter and the spirit of that law still today in 2017. I can only come up with one reason for that: stone cold greed on the part of the MTA.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Ronald Smith. How you doing? I'm sorry. I was supposed to be next, but, you know. Anyway, I won't keep it short. I got two statements and a question, okay? I live in Brooklyn, 7-story apartment building. As the young lady said, you know, you get a call from Accessoride to go downstairs to meet your vehicle. When you do go down, the vehicle is not there. You call Accessoride, which they leave you on hold for almost a half an hour, just to find out where the vehicle is. Then you're being told that it's been sent to a broker service, which means it's a taxi cab, which means that that taxi cab, hey, listen, he'll be there whenever he be there, you know, and so you could go back upstairs and wait. So now he calls saying, oh, I'm right downstairs. I've been downstairs for at least 20 minutes, which was a lie. So by the time you get downstairs, he's gone. And you get penalized for a person who lied deliberately, purposely, and maliciously. And then you get told, you get one of those automatic messages from MTA. This is Accessoride. You've been told that you've been late too many times, and if you're late, you can be suspended or your privileges can be taken away. Now, this happened on more than one occasion, and the last one was pretty interesting. This was an actual Accessoride that showed up late, an hour late, and then the driver had to tell me he has to go use the bathroom and then pick up somebody else. Now, I understand man's been in the car for quite some time. I told him, listen, when I'm near Brooklyn Junction, the Target's supermarket is right near the bus station. There's a place where the bus drivers park. Why don't you just go park your car over there and run up in the bathroom? Well, no, he couldn't do that. I said, wait a minute, aren't you part of MTA?
I have to ask you to wrap up, Mr. Smith.
Okay, all right. Anyway, last question. We're told that the fare is going to be going up at some point. Most Accessoride passengers can go online to order their Accessoride trip, but why is it that we cannot use our credit card or debit card to book these trips? Amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jennifer Bartlett, and then Pedro Rivera. Jennifer Bartlett.
Hi, I'm Professor Jennifer Bartlett. I'm also with Rise and Resist. I'm here to speak today about elevator service at the MTA. There are a lot of people here from Accessoride, and I want to thank them for coming too. There's a reason for this. It's a social reason. This is no accident. Society has made us invisible in order to protect themselves for their own discomfort. The issues that Accessoride people are bringing up, and those that I'm bringing up, are very, very fixable. Why can you have 3 or 4 apps as to that moment a bus is coming, but a person with a disability has to wait outside in the snow for a car? Recently in the paper, the MTA encouraged those with impairments to take the subway. Thank you for the encouragement, but how am I supposed to do that when the elevators are broken, they're dirty, the machines are not maintained to refill my card, so I have to walk 3 blocks to get my card refilled. If I lose my disability card, it takes 4 weeks to get a new one. I'm asking, I know there's a problem with Cuomo and he's to blame as well, but I'd like you to fix this. As one last thing, I would like to see a person with a visible disability on your board.
Thank you, Ms. Bartlett. Pedro Rivera, to be followed by Evangelist Suzanne Mendoza.
I am not Pedro, but I am next. I'm number 11. I am Jackie Goldenberg,
Oh, I apologize.
age almost 73, and I suffer from a rare lung disease. I believe this disease is a result of being downtown on 9/11. Stairs on the subway are hard for me. I can use them now, but in the future, when I will be dragging an oxygen tank with me, who knows? Does Governor Cuomo or the MTA care at all about old people like me? We are on fixed incomes, can't afford cabs, but also need and deserve quick and reliable transportation. We too are invisible in this city. Too bad subways lack elevators, and when they have them, they are broken, filthy, and they stink. Fix them, Cuomo.
Thank you, Ms. Goldenberg. Pedro Rivera, then Suzanne Mendoza.
Good morning, MTA board members, interim Chairman Fernando Ferrer, and interim CEO Ronnie Hakem. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Pedro Valdez Rivera Jr., and I'm from Bed-Stuy, and I'm the member of the Rise Lines, grassroots nonprofit organization dedicated to fight for affordable fares and improved service for subways and bus riders citywide. So today I'll talk about one, it's all about the procurements, the partisan agenda, which is a $2 million contract for motion sensors on the subways, on the subway tracks, and which is a very cost-effective, very convenient, and very efficient idea. And here's why. In the past several years, there are a lot more people riding the subways. And in the past several years, a lot more people are falling on the tracks, either intentionally or unintentionally, or they do it on purpose. So I understand that the MTA's #1 priority is safety for the customers and employees, and I applaud for that. So that's why this procurement of a $2 million the motion sensors. We see if there's a person on the tracks, the train will be alarmed to stop ahead, and I hope the MTA board will go through, because if it's successful, that will expand it to the old subway systems, the whole subway system citywide. Because remember, safety is the #1 priority, and it can save a lot of lives in the long run. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Suzanne Mendoza, and then Ed Frank, and then Linda Spellman.
Good morning. My name is Evangelist Susan Mendoza, and I'm representing my pastor, Reverend Dr. Robert L. Foley Sr., and the over 200 members of my church, Cosmopolitan Church of the Lord Jesus, located in the Bronx, New York. Allowing alcohol ads to be displayed in public areas where thousands of our children access public transit is on par with your putting a glass of liquor into the hands of our children, because there is implicit trust that these ads have been vetted and approved for display. So therefore, the information is right and good. And in the minds of many of our children, that equates to there being nothing wrong with drinking alcohol. You know the statistics. You know the real risks that these ads pose to our kids, including my own grandchildren who use public transit to get to and from school every day. Let me tell you about Mo, one of the clients in a transitional housing facility where I have the honor and the privilege of being the executive director. Mo became an alcoholic at age 12. Her parents did not give her her first drink. Something made her believe that there was nothing wrong in drinking alcohol. Today, that something could be one of your ads, your public transit ads, excuse me. I ask you today to use the authority vested in each of you to do what is the right and moral thing to do, and that is to please stop allowing alcohol advertising on New York City Transit. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Ed Frank, then Linda Spellman, then Ian Christmer.
Good morning. I'd like to talk to you about something a little bit different. It's a sublease that in June 2015 you gave to from Metro North Commuter Railroad to Chappaqua Station, a development for 28 affordable housing units. This particular building that's proposed is 15 feet from the Metro North Railroad and 5 feet from Sawmill River Parkway off-ramp. Here's what you folks agreed to. Metro North has reviewed the development from a safety and operations perspective in terms of potential impact to the Harlem Line right-of-way and has determined that with development restrictions and safety protocols, the development should not impact Harlem Line operations. Well, what about the building? 15 feet away, on grade level, built on piers, columns, not foundation walls. And there have been so many unfortunate incidents in Westchester County, just recently in Rye, Valhalla, where people in my town, 2 were killed in the Valhalla crash, and then, of course, at Spuyten Duyvil in Riverdale. So what we've asked Mr. Giletti to do is to conduct a safety study to see what would happen if there were a train derailment. And I also asked him to provide me and my group, who I represent, with just one other building in the facility operated by Metro North that's on grade 15 feet from the railroad, closer than most of you people listening to me, and that has not been forthcoming. And I've been hearing a lot of things this morning on another topic about safety and people who need help, and I've heard some talk about racist happenings. This particular building must be affirmatively marketed to Hispanic and African American people. To me, that's a problem, and it should be a problem to each of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Linda Spellman. Good morning, Ms. Spellman. Followed by Ian Christmer, then D.M. Boyd.
Sure. Yes. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm a little hoarse right now, but I sort of want to piggyback. My name is Linda Spellman, off of my brothers and sisters that got up here and spoke on behalf of Accessoride. All the incidents that they were saying do occur. I am a totally blind client, has been an Accessoride client since 1996. Yes, I do have a PCA. There are times I'm with my aid or without my aid, and Accessoride seems to be becoming more ridiculous. I'm very grateful for the service because it allows me to get to where I need to go. But it has been happening lately that for example, I was at church about 2 weeks ago, and I had a 4:13 p.m. pickup. And I understand they give us that half an hour that we must allow the driver. So now I'm calling because I didn't get my 14-minute call from the automated service. They're explaining that a driver, I'm in the Bronx, is on East 19th and 1st Avenue, having to drop off, pick up, and drop off and pick up. I says, okay, so that means that they're not going to get here within that half an hour. Is there something else to do? Once again, they'll say, well, you can cancel, then you have to wait for 45 minutes to an hour before we can try and get you another ride. Everywhere was closed down at that point. I managed to get home, and I told them I did not have $60+ to get home. They did not care. I got home by a stranger. Thank God I was safe. They called me at 7:45 with a driver to come pick me up from where I was, unsafe. There are too many incidents that are happening, and I'm just hoping and praying. It has to do with scheduling. I don't understand why things are not changed, but something must be done. There are a few more incidents that happen after that as well, but I won't go deep into them. All I know is that I'm a person that I say, oh, what's the sense of complaining? Oh, nothing's going to get done. But now I have to do it because on behalf of myself, and my other brothers and sisters and disabled people and elderly that are taking Accessoride, and the drivers, some of them are courteous and some don't even need to be working because they have manners that's like, oh, forget it. If Jesus came down, he wouldn't pay him any attention. Okay? So I'm just here to stand on behalf of things that need to be changed. And I know I found out about an Uber situation because I was stuck for 2 hours. I didn't even know they had that. I understand it's a pilot situation that they're doing now, hoping that it can stay. Something has got to be done because we are in too much danger at different times. And I'm totally blind. And I really am so tired of yelling. I don't know what more to do. So I just stand on behalf today to say, please do something about this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spellman.
You're welcome.
Ian Christmer, and then D.M. Boyd, and then Christine Yearwood. Mr. Christmer?
Good morning, esteemed members of the MTA Board. I'm here today as a father of 2 young children who ride the subway and as a healthcare advocate with Bon Secours Health System. I respectfully request that the board amend the MTA ad policy to ban alcohol advertising. Other cities such as Boston, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles have done this, and their budgets have survived. The MTA has already banned tobacco and political ads. In this case, there's a clear moral and public health imperative to ban alcohol advertising. A recent study by Dr. Sham Lucan at Montefiore found that more alcohol ads are present in stations in communities with higher rates of poverty, more non-Hispanic blacks, more adults who don't have high school degrees, and large families. This parallels the reality on the street. In my neighborhood, Riverdale, I see virtually no alcohol advertising. I go down to Kingsbridge or near the Marble Hill houses, and I see alcohol ads across the street from playgrounds and schools. This is unjust. We've spoken about this at my synagogue, the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale, and people are bothered to know that the MTA exposes kids to unhealthy messages such as alcohol advertising. Last month, members of the campaign to build alcohol ad-free transit spoke here and requested to schedule a meeting with MTA staff and representatives of the Finance Committee. I today respectfully repeat this request. Public transit exists for us. There is no public transit without us, the public. In the 90s, the board did the right thing, removed tobacco advertising. I request that you please do the right thing today and also remove alcohol advertising. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. DM Boyd?
Hi.
And then Christine Yearwood.
Thank you. Sorry?
Good morning.
Hello, my name is Ian Boyd. I'm here as a mother of a 14-year-old who rides the subway every day to and from school. The subway is her yellow school bus. I'm concerned about the amount of beer and alcohol ads she sees every day and everywhere, on the turnstiles, along the walls, and on the train. Underage drinking is a major problem in New York City, and especially in the area where we live on the Lower East Side. It is a leading factor in problems like teen pregnancy, problems in school, and over 7,000 emergency room visits a year. Research shows the earlier young people drink, the greater chance they become alcoholics, engage in dangerous behaviors like violence and attempting suicide. I'm here to urge the MTA Board to not allow alcohol advertising on New York City public transit. We'd like to set up a meeting to discuss this further. Like my daughter, there are over 670,000 kids that use the public transportation system as their school bus. Please help mothers like me keep our children safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Yearwood?
Hi, good morning. My name is Christine Sarginian Yearwood, and I'm the founder of Upstand, a movement to make public spaces and transportation more accessible for pregnant women and families. Upstand proposed and advocated for this program, and we are here today to represent the outpouring of support from thousands of our peers since you introduced the Baby on Board pilot program. While we have much work to do in terms of making public transit fully accessible for our constituents and allies, this program represents a positive step in the right direction. We now join cities such as London, Seoul, and Tokyo in serving and supporting pregnant riders. With this program, you have provided riders who may appear invisible to their peers with a tool should they choose to be made visible, therefore increasing the likelihood that they receive necessary accommodations. For pregnant women, this emphasis on customer experience is not just a courtesy. Within the first week of becoming pregnant, women may experience nausea, dizziness, fainting, a poor grip, and imbalance. I myself had an ectopic pregnancy that required surgery and the removal of a fallopian tube, none of it ever visible. A stable and uncrowded space in which to sit during what is on average a 40-minute commute here is an important protective measure for maternal and fetal health. This program is not costly, yet has the ability to remove a large barrier to using public transportation for pregnant women. And now there is the potential for them to continue to obtain employment, access health care, pursue educational opportunities, and participate in and contribute to the economic vitality of our state. We thank you for listening to us, for designing and implementing this program, and for bringing awareness to this issue. We look forward to continuing to collaborate so that it continues beyond its pilot phase and into permanency, and to continue to make accessibility a priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is Stephanie Kutros with you as well?
Yes, I am.
Good morning.
Hi, my name's Stephanie Katros, and I'm here to support both Ms. Yearwood and to promote the Baby on Board pilot to become a permanent program within the MTA. As an expectant mother of one toddler at home, I actually, during my first pregnancy, I had to completely stop riding the subway. I was commuting from Queens into the Bronx, and I had extreme morning sickness, which caused me to be hospitalized between 6 and 7 times to get fluids. I would stand on the subway, I would pass out. No one would help me. I was stuck, rendered unconscious twice in Harlem, and had to get a cab up to work. So that caused my family and I to then incur extra expenses to have to take my own vehicle and to pay for parking, which was not provided by my employer. I'm ecstatic that this program is now in place because it is a first step in allowing expectant parents who are not yet visibly pregnant to access a seat on the subway. I know there's a lot of different accessibility concerns out here in our great city, but this is one, and families are important, and giving mothers and all sorts of mothers with different kind of economic resources. I was fortunate enough to be able to incur those expenses, but most people need those jobs. They need their income to be able to ensure that they can continue to work and not have to take on thousands of dollars in driving and tolls and parking because they were unable to access a seat and were ill and had extra medical bills. So I'm hoping that I'm excited to see this program. I'm excited to wear the button, get a seat, although I did not have it on the way here, and my friend did actually have to yell in the subway car, who will give this 30-week pregnant woman a seat? And eventually I did get a seat. So I'm in support of it, and I hope that it continues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good luck to you all. Masha Barina, and then Stephanie Viras.
Good morning, MTA Board members. My name is Masha Barina, and I'm a senior organizer at the Riders Alliance. We are a grassroots organization fighting for better public transit in New York. As a community organizer, I hear from subway and bus riders every single day. And riders are frustrated by the delays, crowding, and unreliable service. Workers now leave their homes not knowing if and when they'll get to their jobs. Parents are unsure about pickups at daycare, patients miss medical appointments. The list of missed connections is endless, and the frustration is growing. And with good reason. For decades, the subway system hasn't gotten the attention it needs from the governor and elected leaders, and underinvestment has led to the situation we have today. So we were pleased to see Governor Cuomo yesterday declare publicly that he is responsible for fixing the ailing subway. That's a necessary step toward a solution. But now comes the hard part. What is Governor Cuomo's plan in detail, and exactly how does he plan to fund it? In our state, only the governor is in a position to lead us to a better transit service, and only he and the state legislature are able to raise the revenue needed to bring the system into a modern age. So we hope that as a next step, Governor Cuomo comes forward with a solid plan supported by a credible independent experts that can lead our subways to the quality and reliability we need. Not a plan to do what we can with too little money, but a plan to truly fix the problem and a fair and sustainable way to raise the money. That's the leadership we need from Governor Cuomo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stephanie Veras, and then Mary Parisen.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Veras, and I'm a community organizer at the Riders Alliance. The Riders Alliance is a grassroots organization that fights for better and more reliable public transportation. As my colleague Masha previously just mentioned, transit advocates are pleased to see that Governor Cuomo has taken responsibility for our subway system. And while our subway system, our Access-a-Ride, and our accessibility in our network is in dire need of repair, our bus system is also, it continues to deteriorate. And slow and unreliable buses make commuting excruciating long, especially for millions of New Yorkers that live far away from a train and have no other option to move around. They need a bus to get to the train to move around. So it's really important to look at our bus and subway system as one network. We can't choose only to fix one part of the problem. Together, our system moves over 10 million riders daily. So it's extremely important that the MTA starts to think of how we can fix both of our systems together. Last week, in conjunction with 67 state legislators, the Bus Turnaround Coalition released a letter to Governor Cuomo, asking him to direct the MTA to implement 2 low-cost solutions to improve bus service. And those are transit signal priority and all-door boarding. Now, transit signal priority and all-door boarding are proven solutions, and we have seen these features on our select bus service routes, and they actually have increased ridership and increased bus reliability. Last week, Commissioner Polly Treinberg testified before the City Council about how great the value of TSP has been where it has been implemented. So if these solutions work, they are successful, and we have seen what it can do to our buses, why isn't the MTA eager to implement these features citywide? Riders need a timeline. We need an action plan. But riders also need to get to work. They need to visit their families. And they should be able to rely on their bus and subway systems. So today, on behalf of 2.5 million bus riders, we look forward to see a detailed plan and a timeline of the implementation of signal priority and a commitment to all-door boarding when the new Fairman payment system comes online. So 67 state legislators, 2.5 million bus riders, and the transit advocate community agrees that the time to turn around our buses is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Parison, then Jonathan Boev, and then Gene Rushinoff with Jackie Cohen.
Good morning. My name is Mary Parison. I'm the chair of a coalition, Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions. I'm here to ask what progress has been made with the rebidding of the Long Island Railroad freight concession, which expired in April of 2017. In November 2014, New York and Atlantic Railroad wrote a letter to President Nowakowski requesting a 10-year renewal. And they stated that they were operating within the law, that they had a good safety record. And 8 months later, July of 2015, they had the infamous tractor-trailer accident after blowing through 3 railroad crossings. New York and Atlantic Railway can't remedy the fact that they used unqualified crew that was speeding when it crashed into this tractor-trailer. Then 2 months later after that, in September of 2015, we had the Hicksville derailment, where thousands of Long Island Railroad commuters were inconvenienced over several days. It was after this accident that President Nowakowski said that there would be changes to the transfer agreement. The FRA investigated them, found many violations. So at this point, where does this rebidding stand? New York and Atlantic have to go. We've been contacted by more than one employee of New York and Atlantic with complaints of unsafe labor practices. We've asked the board what money has been paid back from the Long Island Railroad cleanups for these accidents, which we have not gotten any word. The other item I'd like to speak about are the procurement of the locomotives. In your packet today, you will see a letter that our local Congresswoman Grace Meng, along with Joseph Crowley, and our state-elected officials have written asking that future procurements of locomotives be Tier 4. Chairman of the California Air Resource Board also petitioned the U.S. EPA, which you will see in that packet as well, explaining why it's critically important to public health and welfare for these locomotives. And lastly, I just want to speak very quickly about $128 million for the New York State DEC, which is the Volkswagen-Dira settlement. Government entities may be eligible for this 100% funding for these Tier 0 locomotives which are being used, and we ask that this information be shared with STV, who is the consultant that will go forth with the procurement of the locomotives, which we've been advocating along with our state officials.
You'll have to wrap up, Ms. Parison.
For this funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bove?
Good morning. Good morning, board. Good morning, guests. My name is Jonathan Boev, and I create Beta Transit. Today I want to talk about a couple of things that really bother me, and I think bother many riders here. So this summer we have coming abduction of Penn Station, where the Amtrak is planning to make its repairs over there. So it is like international airlines, they manage to communicate to each other and book one flight for one car for multiple flights. So my suggestion is to have the same thing to do with Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, and Long Island Railroad to communicate, get to the table, and run trains somewhere from Long Island, let's say Ronkonkoma, all the way to Philadelphia, without actually stopping. In such way, you can reduce three tracks, three services by one at the Penn Station, and reduce the occupancy. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the bottleneck issues that occurs on Long Island Railroad and probably also Metro North, particularly where mainline bifurcates or has no electrical power afterwards. So, like bus company have created the queue jumps. So the same thing I would recommend to add additional check on stations like Mineola and Huntington to have trains wait there for arrival and trains and continue from there to peripheral locations. Lastly, I have a question about the L train service, which has a CBTC feature on it and also runs every 4 minutes. Why is it so when 6 train is much more crowded and runs every 2 to 3 minutes daily? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gene Rushinoff with Jackie Cohen.
Good morning. Good morning, MTA board members. Hello, hello, hello. That's all right. My name is Gene Rushinoff, and with me is
Jackie Cohen.
And good morning, board members. We come today not to bury the accessoride. We come today not to bury the accessoride program, but to offer a way to work with you to make it something better for the entire city. And with that in mind, we've come up, for those of you who weren't here last Monday, we've come up with 10 plagues that represent the current crummy condition of the accessoride. So without further ado, let's give you our remaining 5 plagues.
The plague of cold. Your accessoride arrives on time, but the car heater is broken. A window won't close fully. Needless to say, it's the heart of winter.
Plague of the incognito. Because many accessoride cars do not have any identification, you're often forced to wait for many minutes as cars whiz by that could be yours. It's extremely stressful.
The plague of being on hold. Your vehicle is late, but you might still make it on time if you've got an honest assessment of its location. You tell Accessoride about your problem, and then you are put on hold, and hold, and hold, and hold, and...
Plague of lies. Maybe one of the worst plagues. You're told by the dispatcher that the accessoride car will be there in 5 minutes, and then another 5 minutes. And then another 5 minutes, another 10 minutes. This makes the thing stress-a-ride for so many of your customers.
The plague of, hello? Transit managers told us that drivers were discouraged from saying more than hello to passengers, even to such basic questions as, what is the next stop? Or where are we going?
Again, we look forward to working with you. This is a program that could be made much better without a tremendous amount of money. And you should be doing that. Thank you.
Bravo. Thank you very much, Mr. Rushinoff. That's the halfway mark.
Call the next one. Call the next one.
Diana Mall. Do we have Diana Mall? I think so. Okay.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Diana, and I'm a registered nurse for 44 years. I worked for 44 years as a registered nurse. I became ill in 2012 and started using Accessoride.
Just hold the microphone close if you would, Ms. Mall.
Everyone here has done a better job of expressing their frustrations with Accessoride than I can ever do. However, I do have a few things to say. First of all, as an administrator, I administrated millions of dollars on my jobs, and I look at Accessoride as a failing program, and it's due to poor administration. You guys get millions for this program, and something is not happening here. This is an administrative crisis, and sooner or later, you're going to have a major problem when there's an accident and clients get killed. So I say to you, you have to administrate Accessoride. You have to look and see, look at your job descriptions. These people, half of them don't know what they're doing. I administered programs. I remember that I had to meet 1 million regulations. Your cars don't meet any regulations for disabled. The whole thing is falling apart. Now, one thing that I do have to add to what the other people said is that we need quality assurance to be put in. This business has to be run as a business. It can't be run as a side thing. Okay, so what we need here is surveys, client surveys, that clients are, you call Time Warner and a person comes out to your house and you get a survey form to fill out on that visit. You tell Time Warner how that person took care of you. Were they on time? Did they resolve your problems? Did they have a good personality? All of these things. This is Time Warner or Spectrum, whatever it's called. You call Verizon, it's the same thing. We need this for Accessoride. We need to give you guys feedback on what's happening. And these surveys have to be looked at and reviewed by administrators.
Can you wrap up, please, Ms. Mall?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I think that's really the only thing that I have to add to it, that we need a Bill of Rights for riders on Accessoride. We need rights. Okay? And it's got to be written. It's got to be in writing, and we have to sign off that we received a copy of that Bill of Rights. Okay?
Thank you very much.
We have heard from around 25 speakers, and we have 21 to go. I'm going to ask your indulgence, however, to allow us to get back into important matters on our agenda with the assurance. I'm not going to ask again to try to keep order. With the assurance that this board will return and hear every speaker until the speakers list is exhausted. So we will be here as long as you are here. Now may I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss a matter regarding proposed, pending, current litigation and potential acquisition of real property pursuant to Section 105(1)D of the New York State Public Officers Law. Is there a second? All in favor? May I have all opposed? Abstaining? We're in executive session. May I have a motion to come out of executive session? Second. All in favor? We are out of executive session. Let me, before we continue with our agenda and public speakers, make an announcement to all of you. At the next meeting of the board, we have had, and at the urging of a good number of our board members, we have had discussions internally about improving Accessoride. Those plans and that discussion will be discussed fully and openly at our next MTA board meeting and at the New York City Transit meeting. So I want to assure you that we've been paying attention and we will share with you those thoughts, and you will have, of course, an opportunity to respond to them. Now, okay. I chaired the transit meeting this Monday, and for all the following matters, the committee members who were present at the committee meeting considered and voted in favor of the actions, although a committee quorum was not present for the vote. There is one action item for board approval. The action item requests approval to make the X28 weekend service permanent. I move approval of this action item. Second. Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The action item carries. There were 8 procurement actions this month, and the total amount of $24.2 million. There are 4 non-competitive procurements totaling $1.7 million for the New York City Transit. There are 4 non-competitive procurements totaling $1.7 million for New York City Transit, described on pages 254 and 255 of the board book. I move approval of these procurement items. Is there a second? Any discussion on them? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? These procurement items carry. There are 4 competitive procurements totaling $22.5 million for New York City Transit, described on pages 256 and 262 of the board book. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. Is there a second? Is there any discussion on them? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry. There are no ratification, and that concludes the report. We're not ready for finance? The Metro North Committee, Dr. Metzger.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Metro North Committee met and a quorum was present. I report the following. There are 8 procurement items in the total amount of $50.9 million. There are 2 non-competitive procurements in the amount of $7.6 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second.
Opposed?
Wait a minute.
Mr. Saul?
Yes, I'd like to speak, but you can't speak now. I mean, you know. How am I going to speak? This is ridiculous.
I am going to ask Mr. Stoll to please continue.
Why don't we talk to these people, Freddie? I mean, it's ridiculous. They didn't understand what you said, obviously.
Mr. Chairman, may I say something? Mr. Chairman, may I say something?
Sure.
Folks, can I say something to you on behalf of at least myself, and I think I speak for the board? We went into executive session for a few issues. Amongst them are issues surrounding how we can fund and allocate dollars for the exact issues you're talking about. But we have to have an orderly meeting in order to be able to do that, and we're trying we have heard you, and we really do want to make improvements to the things you are saying. We feel them, and we feel, but we also have to conduct the business that allows us to make those improvements. So we are hearing you. But we can't let this devolve into. We can't have an iterative back and forth discussion in the board meeting. We need to continue with the business. Okay. I'm sorry. That went poorly.
We're not sorry for you, James. If you're not going to hear us, please step down now.
Let me repeat something to all the people who are speaking right now, and want to say this one more time. We will hear every one of you. I will remain, the board will remain, to hear every one of you after we have concluded this important business. So please allow us to do that. Then I'm going to ask that we keep order here until we can conclude. Mr. Saul, please continue.
Right. I'd like to speak to the procurement Automotive Resources International, which is found on page 276 of our book. This is something that came up at the Metro North meeting on Monday, and I was very concerned about it, not only because of this one procurement, but because of what's happening, I believe, in the whole procurement process of our MTA now. Unfortunately, as I don't know how many of my fellow board members are aware, we had an unfortunate incident occur with our purchasing agent at the business center. and he had to be relieved of his duties, which in my opinion was obviously the right decision. That happened back in March, and it's now almost June, and we need to, and unfortunately this happened, as I understand, during a period when we were consolidating a lot of the purchasing from the different agencies into the business center, which is the right thing to do and has been our long-term plan here. Weil, I've spoken to Weil, and he's doing everything he can. He's got so many jobs he's trying to handle now, including trying to hire a new chief procurement officer. So what happened, and what I'm concerned about is this is only one of the procurements that I've seen. Some don't come before, the committee. I'm not on all the committees, but I do think we're starting to see a real breakdown in our procurement policy. So if you go to this number 6, Automated Resources International, and the way I understand it, this is a contract for maintenance of Long Island Railroad, Metro North, and New York City Transit, paratransit equipment to maintain them. And we had a contract that was procured by competitive bidding in 2012 for approximately $34 million. Now it was 5 years, the contract's run out, and now they're proposing a 2-year extension of this contract, which is not for rocket scientist stuff. I mean, this is not real sole source where you only have one vendor that can perform this, with a 40% increase for that 2-year period. Why? Because this thing was not bid out. Nobody bid this out. They knew this thing was coming up. It was a 5-year contract. Now they're proposing a 2-year extension where the average yearly cost of this contract is going from $6.8 million to $9.5 million, a 40% increase. And there's no way that this should be approved, and I am very concerned about this, and I wonder how many other contracts around this huge organization have not being rebid out on a timely fashion. So this is a lot of money, a lot of state money, and we're talking about money. We're supposed to be on a real conservative kick here to watch expenses with all this debt and everything we've got, and here we go, 40% increase. So I propose that this thing gets voted down and that we extend this thing, which I'm sure this contractor will do if he wants to stay in the game, for 6 months at the current rate that we're paying. I mean, this is just ridiculous. And I also hope that we really, and I think Weil needs help here, I think we need to get top management in here and get a top purchasing agent in the business center before we go out of control. So I'm voting no on this procurement, and I hope everybody else does.
Before we have any other comments, I know our Executive Director, Ronnie Haken, would like to say a word.
Right. So, Commissioner, you raised a very important point about recruiting a new Chief Procurement Officer. I want to assure the Board that that is a top priority for headquarters because it is consistent with the vision that you all had towards consolidation and the cost savings associated with that we continue on that initiative led by that office. And so we anticipate having some candidates interviewed very shortly. I've seen the list. There are a couple of very strong candidates on that list and hope to fill that position very quickly. In terms of the procurement at hand, this was a request, as the Commissioner noted, for a 2-year extension. My suggestion is that we cut that extension period down to 1 year, and in that time period, obviously even shorter if possible, to have the team rebid competitively bid for this service so that we maintain the vehicles that we need to maintain, but tell the team to ASAP get this procurement rebid.
The only question I have, Ronnie, is why can't we give them a 6-month extension at the then current rate? At least try.
We can try
for
for that. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know, but right. It's still, you're talking about $2.7 million or whatever it is for the 1 year.
Yeah, this is crosses
a lot of money. It's
all
a huge,
the agencies.
Huge increase. Well, I think I'd like to see us go back and do better than that.
Mm-hmm. I will also note that there was an increase in the number of vehicles being serviced. But again, Commissioner, I fully respect the suggestion.
Is there any other comment to be made? We ready for a vote? All in favor?
I have a comment. Did we have a vote yet? There was a second point made at Metro North, which I think is also applicable. I think Jamie made the point. One of the difficulties on a project, on a procurement like this, is the run-up time. In other words, when the contract is so close to expiring, the board doesn't have an opportunity to say, I think this should be bid out, because there's not enough time to do the bidding. So it would be very much appreciated if your new procurement officer takes a look at when contracts are expiring so that we can deal with them on a timely basis and make those decisions appropriately. Thank you.
Schwartz.
Yeah, I have a question. I just want to make sure I'm clear what we're voting on. Are we voting on the issue that Mr. Saul just addressed about his concern about doing a 2-year extension on this particular procurement? And if we are we looking to maybe possibly vote on the recommendation made by the executive director in terms of reducing it to 1 year? So I want to know what we're actually voting on, because there was a suggestion to reduce it to a year. I don't know if Mr. Saul finds that acceptable, but I would prefer to vote for the executive director's recommendation rather than support the 2-year extension that Mr. Saul objects to.
Is there anyone who wishes to offer an amendment?
So I'll amend. I will recommend we amend number 6 for a 1-year extension at a rate to be negotiated by the executive director and her staff with the contractor, and that we rebid the contract as quickly as possible.
And can we have a second?
I second Mitch's.
Okay.
Can we keep the same
At the same rate.
the goal for the 1 year?
The goal is 1 year or less at the same rates, if I understood correctly.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Can we have, do we have a second on this amendment?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The amendment carries. Now the procurement package.
Thank you for the discussion. I think that was appropriate and made good points. There are 6 competitive procurements in the amount of $43.4 million. For the competitive procurements, there were 6 voting members present with a total of 4 votes. Of those 4 votes, 3 were in favor and 1 was against. I move the board approve these procurements.
Bear in mind that the procurements, that one procurement has been amended.
Correct.
So we are voting on the amended procurements.
Correct.
There's been a motion. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry as amended. Now I'd like to thank...
There are no ratifications. Therefore, this concludes the Metro North Committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Metzger. Now I'd like to return to Committee on Finance and Mr. Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are 2 action items for board approval. The first action item requests the board approve the resolution authorizing the submission of the draft payroll mobility tax obligation resolution, standard resolution provision, and supplemental resolution provisions to the Capital Program Review Board. The second action item approves the MTA, its subsidiaries, and its affiliated agencies to engage in retainer agreements for legal services as described in the staff summary distributed in this month's board book. The committee recommends these action items, and I move them.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The action items carry.
There is one non-competitive procurement for $25.8 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Non-competitive procurements carry.
There are 2 competitive procurement items this month in the total amount of $14 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion on these competitive procurements? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The competitive procurements carry.
On C2M. I'm abstaining on C2M.
And that'll be noted. Thank you.
There is 1 ratification in the amount of $2.3 million. The committee recommends this ratification, and I move it.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion on these ratifications? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The ratifications carry. Real estate items.
There are 4 real estate action items which are described on pages 236 through 246 in the board book distributed for this meeting. This includes the walk-in item distributed at committee. The committee recommends these items, and I move them.
There is a second. I wish to be recorded as a recusal on the extension item for advertisements. Is there any discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
That concludes Finance Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schwartz. Long Island Railroad Committee, Mr. Pally.
There are 8 procurement items totaling $24.9 million. There are 3 non-competitive procurements, 1 for Long Island Railroad in the amount of $4.1 million and 2 for MTA Capital Construction in the total amount of $5.8 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Is there any discussion on? Yes, Mr. Elbert.
Mitch, do you know if the leased cars from the Maryland Transit Administration will have Long Island Railroad markings on them?
I don't know the answer to that question, Pat. I don't think so.
No, so they're going to say Maryland MTA on them?
Yes. Because they go back.
Thank you.
When we're done with them, they go back.
One could say a great many things at a moment like this. Is there anything else on the non-competitive procurements? Hearing none, are we ready for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Non-competitive procurements carry.
There are 2 competitive procurements for the Long Island Railroad in the total amount of $10.5 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The competitive procurements carry.
There are 3 ratifications, 1 for the Long Island Railroad in the amount of $1.2 million and 2 for MTA Capital Construction in the total amount of $3.1 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
No, this is still Long Island Railroad. Still Long Island Railroad.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Motions carry.
That concludes the report of the Long Island Railroad Committee.
Mr. Pally, you also chaired the Bridges and Tunnels Committee. Would you issue that report?
There are 7 competitive procurement action items this month in the amount of $26.46 million for bridges and tunnels. The committee members who were present at the committee meeting considered and voted in favor of the procurements. Although a committee quorum was not present for the vote, I move the board approve these procurement items.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion on these procurements? Hearing none?
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah. So a lot of these procurements here are for the open road tolling cost, plaza changes for open road tolling. And I want to make it clear, I think that open road tolling is the right way to go, and I agree with the governor on that, no question. However, we are doing all these things on a non-bid, sole source or not all, but the vast majority, procurement process. And I have a concern about that. It's a very big item in the capital plan change that we are going to take up next, I assume, at this board meeting. In March 2017, the staff, at my request of the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, at that point, we had $130 million worth of changes that were approved and voted on for this open road tolling construction, and it was very close to the estimate by our internal engineers, and it was substantially less than what was initially proposed after negotiation. So in March, as of, I guess, the end of February, we were around $130 million. But if you look at almost all these procurements that we're asked to approve here, and they're non-competitive, I guess I didn't add it up, but it's quite a bit of money in this one procurement package. And I'm just concerned, and I'm concerned with the capital plan that we're going to be voting on, that we don't lose control of a lot of these things. They're great ideas, but they have to be done in a proper form, and they can't be rushed through so that we can lose control here and we just wind up holding the bag for a huge amount of costs. Now, I'm going to vote in favor of this, but I would request, and I think the whole board should get, a new update from the Bridge and Tunnel staff as to where we stand now and what the additional costs are on this open road tolling for our next board meeting in June. And I would hope, Ronnie, that you could please ask the Triborough Bridge people to come back to us with an updated version of what they gave us in March 2017, which was very well done.
Glad to do that. We'll do that at the next board meeting.
Okay. Mr. Pally?
I move the board approve these procurement items.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? We're ready for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The item carries.
There are no non-competitive procurements and no ratifications, and this concludes the Bridges and Tunnels Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Pally. The final committee report is from the Diversity Committee. Mr. Malloy.
There is one action item for the board approval. The action item requests approval of the MTA Title VI program as described in the book that has been distributed. A committee quorum was not present, however. I recommend the board approve the action item, and I move it.
Second.
Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Motion carries.
This concludes the Diversity Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Malloy. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Don Spiro, Stephanie Delisle, and Steve Barang for a presentation on the capital plan amendments before you today, and urge their brevity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we want to do today is give you an overview of the proposed changes in our 15 to 19 program, go through the significant changes for each agency, and then talk about the funding changes. As you can see on this first slide, the 15 to 19 program amendment proposes an increase of almost $3 billion from the current approved program, $29.6 billion to $32.5 billion. It fully maintains our commitment to keeping the system in a state of good repair while also funding several major initiatives, including what is listed on the screen. Continuing work on the 2nd Avenue subway, the Phase 2, the 96th to 125th Street part of the 2nd Avenue subway, enhancing our stations, implementing new technology countdown clocks, streamlining commutes on our bridges and tunnels with open road tolling, purchasing additional clean energy buses, improving station accessibility, adding customer amenities such as Wi-Fi and USB charging stations, and also funding to expand and improve the Long Island Railroad service, i.e. third track. The strategies behind the development of the 15 to 19 capital program remain unchanged from what was brought to the board previously. The amendments are built around three main strategic objectives or building blocks. the need to renew our existing assets, enhance the existing system, and also expand the reach of the MTA system. As you can see on this slide, the building blocks, the blue, the orange, and the brown, starting with the renew building blocks. In this proposed amendment, we're adding $700 million in this area, increasing it from $22 billion to $22.7 billion. The enhance part of the program, on a net basis, remains about the same, $2.6 billion to $2.7 billion increase. It does build in several new initiatives, so it's a net change. The lower portion is the network expansion projects that enable us to address the capacity constraints and meet the needs of the regional economy. And in this program, we're adding over $2 billion in this area, $2.1 billion, bringing it from $5 billion to $7.1 billion. Before getting into the agency-specific programs, we wanted to put these changes into context. You can see on the top part of the slide there, since 1981, there have been 7 capital programs and 31 amendments, an average of 4 amendments per plan and nearly 1 per year. And when compared to some prior amendments, there are relatively fewer project changes in this proposed 15 to 19 program compared to the last couple. And the $2.9 billion that we're adding is in the mid-range of the most recent prior amendments that we've brought to the board. With that, we'll move to the agency highlights, starting with New York City Transit. As proposed, New York City's total program is increasing by about $500 million from $16.2 billion to $16.7 billion. The bar on the top on this slide represents the investment percentages in our renew, enhance, and expand building blocks. And in this case, as you can see, 90% of Transit's program is designated for renewal. The significant changes, just walking down quickly through this slide, for buses, we're adding 50 new electric buses. We're also changing the mix of the already planned purchases to include 200 more hybrid electric buses. Over 1,700 buses total are included in this plan. There's a net shift to the next program in the subway car category as a result of phasing the R211 car purchases to meet the timing of the car production schedule. 1,100 cars will be purchased, with 460, including 10 open gangway prototypes. They will be paid for out of this program, and the cost of the remaining 640 will be shifted via an option to the next program when they will actually be delivered. The manufacturer's production schedule or the delivery of the cars into passenger service will not be affected by this funding shift. There are also 75 new cars for Staten Island Railway, as well as an enhancement to the Richmond Valley Station included in this amendment. In the signals and communication category, there's a net shift of $38 million to the next program. The category includes a new project, the Beacon Train Arrival System for the B Division, the countdown clocks, and the realignment of acquisition of CBTC in-car equipment with actual R211 delivery. And that's just the in-car equipment. CBTC will still be installed on 3 lines, the Queens Boulevard, the 8th Avenue, and the Culver line as planned in the current program. The fare collection budget increases by about $100 million for the acceleration of the new fare payment system. That's primarily for force account. The ADA increases of $226 million. That's on top of the $966 million allocated to this category of work. New projects are included on the R line at 77th Street for design, and also construction on the R line at 95th Street. It also includes revised estimates for Hunter College, 57th Street, Bedford Park Concourse, Greenpoint Avenue, and the Rockaway Parkway Canarsie Station. The enhanced stations NIFs included in this amendment increases by approximately $700 million. That's to fund the 32 stations that we've been talking about, including the Penn Station. Continuing with transit, the shop yards category adds funding for the real estate purchase associated with a potential new bus depot. For the line structures, the Bushwick Cut Viaduct increases significantly, and that's due to a change from rehab of the viaduct to replacement. There are also significant increases for power substations on the 8th Avenue and Canarsie lines to ensure that the new capacity associated with CBTC can be met. No changes on the line equipment. Yeah.
On the CBTC installation, am I correct in assuming that on the 6th and 8th Avenue lines, as I recall, it's only going as far south as 47th, 50th on the 6th and 50th and 8th on the 8th Avenue line?
I believe that's correct. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So to say it's CBTC on the Culver line, I mean, when is that going to be live?
CBTC in this program for Culver on the F.
Do you know approximate?
On the current program?
Yes.
The one that's already approved?
Yeah. Do we have any?
I don't recall the completion date of that, but can certainly provide that information to you.
Okay, Long Island Railroad, their program is increasing by a small amount, just around a little under $2 million, but there are some changes in all of the categories, almost all of the categories. For track capacity, the Jamaica capacity improvements, which are fully funded for Phase 1, it will include higher speed switches to create more streamlined track routings. The design for Phase 2, which includes elements east and west of the Jamaica station, will be fully funded in this program, with Phase 2 construction to be funded in the next program to better align with the Phase 1 schedule. There's no change in the rolling stock. There's funding for $280 million for 88 M3 replacement cars, $70 million for 22 growth cars. In the signals area, the design for signalization between Ronkonkoma and Yaphank is funded in this program, with construction moved to 2020 to align with track access. The track state of good repair work is being increased by $28 million to address condition needs since the program was approved. The Enhanced Station Initiatives incorporates 12 additional stations in this program for a total of 17. Design for a new station at the Brookhaven National Laboratory, which will be funded by the state, is also included in this program, and funding is also added to the program for new elevators at the Murray Hill Station based on revised estimates. No change in the power category, 6 substation replacements, 100+ substation component renewals. The Mid-Suffolk Yard improvements are increasing by about $11 million to reflect a revised estimate. And in the line structure category, we're rescheduling the Cherry Valley Road bridge construction. That's about $13 million from 2018 to align with track access. Moving on to Metro North, their program is going up by about by $93 million, increasing from about $2.3 to $2.4 billion. There's no change in the rolling stock category. The replacement of M3 and the expansion of the New Haven line fleet, jointly funded with ConDOT, is included. The shop yards, there's no change. The last phase of the Croton Harmon shop replacement continues in this program. There's a funding swap for the track work. Connecticut picking up some of the cost to reduce our cost by $22 million. In the line structures category, there's an addition to the overhead bridge program. It includes the Prospect Hill and 3rd Avenue bridges. Total count in the program is to replace 6 and repair 39 bridges. We're rephasing the Grand Central Terminal train shed construction. Priority repairs and design will be funded in this program. Construction will be in the next program with no impact at all on customers. We're increasing the PTC-related signal investments for the Hudson, Harlem, and west of Hudson lines. The MNR, the Metro North Enhanced Station Initiative project, the various stations are increasing. 5 new stations are being added. The Harlem and Hudson power improvements are increasing about $13 million. Moving on to bridges and tunnels, the total program is increasing by about $84 million. Primarily for ORT. You can see in the next slide that the big change is a shift from the roadway and decks category to the toll plaza and traffic management category. This is a repurposing of funding in those 2 categories. As you know, there was significant construction deck work planned at the RFK, but with ORT, that cost can go down, will go down, and that money is being reallocated to ORT work across the agency. We're also getting favorable estimates for 2 Bronx Whitestone Bridge projects for a $19 million reduction, and also favorable painting estimates for a $12 million reduction. In terms of network expansion, the total program is increasing, as I said, by about $2 billion from $5 billion to $7.1. The changes include Second Avenue Subway Phase 2 budget, which will increase by $700 million for the near-term 30% match as part of the full funding agreement that we're assuming will move forward. It also includes funding for the Long Island Railroad expansion, which, of course, will provide a third track from Floral Park to Hicksville, as well as eliminate 7 grade crossings, which will be funded by the state. East Side access and related investments will decrease by $464 million. This is simply an administrative change, a transfer from the 15 to 19 to the 10 to 14 program. It's a consolidation of related work that was budgeted in both programs. Penn Station access budget remains the same at $695 million. And then winding up with the 2010 to 14 changes, as proposed, this capital program is decreasing by $2.8 billion from $34.8 to $32 billion. The biggest change is the Sandy program reduction. We're reducing that by about $3 billion to line up the budget with available funding. But it's very important to emphasize that all the essential repair and all the essential resiliency projects will move forward, fully move forward despite this funding change. We're also transferring $90 million in project surpluses from B&T's 10 to 14 to 15 to 19 program, and I mentioned the ESA change. That concludes the budget part of the presentation. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie Delisle and Bob Foran to talk briefly about the funding side.
Thank you. As we've heard, the budget for the 15 to 19 program of projects has increased by $2.9 billion to a new total of $32.5 billion. In terms of how we're funding that increase, there is a $681 million increase in the federal funding assumption, including $450 million of CMAQ funding from New York State to support our financial commitment to the Long Island Railroad Mainline Expansion Project. The remaining $231 million is a transfer of federal funds from the 10 to 14 program into this current program to support projects. There's a net increase of $1.6 billion in MTA bonds. This reflects $1.9 billion of new money and is offset by transfers from the old program, technical adjustments or movement of funds between programs. Pay-as-you-go capital increases by a net of $345 million, reflecting $424 million of new MTA pay-go, and the transfer of about $80 million of previously approved funds back to the old program, another of those technical administrative adjustments. As you see, the state of New York is providing an additional $130 million, $65 million for the overall New York City Transit program, and $65 million for Long Island Railroad's station improvements. And finally, in the area of other MTA sources, there's $6 million of pay-go from B&T's program. That's basically just a movement of funds from below the line to above to fund their small business mentoring program. And an additional $7 million of previously unplanned cash receipts that we're adding to the core program for a total net change of $13 million. For 10 to 14, overall, the 10 to 14 program decreases by $2.8 billion. This decrease is due primarily to the $3 billion adjustment to the Sandy program, which, as discussed previously, is to reconcile our early forecast to our final allocations of repair and resiliency funds. But again, it's very important to note that even with these adjustments, MTA is still able to fully fund all of our priority needs and fully fund and fully utilize all of the available resiliency funding for us. The rest of the ups and downs you see are more of those technical adjustments that move previously approved funding between old and current programs to match project usage. Federal. This adjustment is primarily the transfer or swap with the 15 to 19 program that we discussed previously. New starts. The $1.3 billion increase you see there is not new money. It reflects the movement of received federal funding for East Side Access and 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 1 into this program to match its usage out of the 05 to 09 program. But this, again, is not new money. Finally, The other movements of funding between approved programs follow the many project-level increases and decreases highlighted during the budget presentation. Movement of funds between approved programs to follow the need, such as the transfer of funds between B&T programs for over-the-road tolling. And now I'll turn the discussion over to Bob Foran.
The incremental funding in this program, $1.9 billion in debt and $400 million in pay-as-you-go capital, will not require an increase in fares or tolls and is already embedded in the current financial plan as we identified last July. It has been funded with savings from debt service refinancings and other areas where we've been able to reduce our capital cost and operating cost. So again, I emphasize that this is not putting any additional pressure on fares and tolls, and it's already included within the current financial plan. With the prior capital plan that was approved, plus this amendment, we will increase our net debt over the next 5 to 7 years by about $5 billion. So we'll go from roughly $38 billion of debt today to about $43 billion of debt. In terms of affordability, something I know the board cares about very much, the percentage of debt service to the total revenues that we have will peak out about 19% versus the 17% that we are today. So again, this increase in funding of $1.9 billion of debt and $400 million of pay-as-you-go will not put any additional pressure on the fares and tolls and is already included within the current financial plan. Mr. Chairman, that completes our presentation.
Thank you. Before any discussion, I'll move to approve the two proposed capital MTA capital program amendments as described in the staff summaries, and to authorize the MTA to submit the capital program review board portions, both amendments, to the CPRB for its review and approval. May I have a second? Is there any discussion? Mr. Vidiello and then Ms. Vanterpool.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest that in subsequent conversations that I'm sure we'll have around our budget, that we consider at least a debt ceiling for ourselves that is below that which is available to us statutorily, as the debt is concerning. But I am also prepared to vote yes on this amendment. Thank you.
There's a lot of good stuff in this capital program amendment, but what is not good in this amendment is debt. And there's $1.9 or $1.6 billion in additional debt that the agency has to assume as part of this existing capital program. Coincidentally, that $1.6 billion is the exact amount that the state's contribution to the capital program would be if it was broken down each year over 5 years, $1.6 billion, for a total of $8.3 billion that the state has committed to this capital program. And some of that capital money has indeed come in each of the years of this capital program, but not that full $1.6 billion. In fact, what we've heard the governor and the state say is that that money will be available to the MTA once the MTA has exhausted all of its resources. And what we're hearing today is the MTA is at a point where it is indeed exhausting its resources. A $5 billion increase in its debt burden is significant. In just 4 years, what that means is that nearly 1 in every $5 is going toward debt service. And while it has been stated that that is not going to have an impact on fares and service, that is in this capital program. That means that in 17, 18, and 19, that additional debt is not going to have any impact. But in the outlying years, we cannot predict that. We cannot guarantee and say that there will not be pressure on service and fares. And the reason we can't say that is because that additional debt has to be serviced. And that service comes from revenues, and it comes from savings, and or it comes from additional investment by the state, from the governor, from the city, the mayor. And in the absence of that, it does indeed put pressure. It means there's $1 less of every 5 that is going toward improving service and making the capital investments that we need. And when you're looking at a capital program the size of this, that's a significant amount of money. I also think it's incredibly curious that this proposed amendment brings the capital program up to $32.5 billion. When the draft capital program was announced and presented to the public in October 2014, and at that time, it was a $29 billion program. It was called bloated, and the agency was instructed to cut 6 to 8% of that capital program. But we are now at that point. Actually, we are above that amount. It was a $29 billion, $32 billion draft plan in October 2014, and it was bloated, and now it's a $32.5 billion program, and it's not bloated anymore. While I will always advocate for a much larger capital program, in fact, I think that the size of our capital programs is too low. It does not adequately reflect the needs and the demands of this system. We should have a capital program that is significantly higher. But we are at this price or this size because it is what is most politically expedient and feasible in order to get approval. And that hasn't even been easy over these years to get that level of approval. So while I advocate always for a much larger program, I do not think that the MTA should be taking out that additional debt in order to make this program happen, particularly for some of the priorities that have been identified in this program. Many of them are certainly worthwhile. Some of them I don't think necessitate the MTA continuing to increase its debt burden. It is a crushing amount of debt, and business has to change. So I am voting no to this capital program amendment.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Jones, then Mr. Saul, and then Mr. Greenberg.
Yes, I'm going to be voting no as well. And it's more, I've listened to Veronica's discussion, I'm worried that this hasn't been subjected to the kind of rigorous public discussion that I think it warrants. To have this vote come and have this significant increase, and while I understand Bob Foreman's promise that this is not going to lead to increased fares, it obviously is going to make it less possible to come up with either enhancements in capital expenditures in other areas, a rapid acceleration in terms of some of the difficulties the riding public are dealing with now in terms of delay, and also things that I've been talking about for a while, the unaffordability of this system to about 1 million New Yorkers already. So we're sort of, we'll march ahead. We'll have those 4% increases, and it'll leave further and further people behind. And this particular expenditure to keep up with the debt service will make it impossible for the system even to consider helping those particular riders. So what I'm really asking for is I'd like a public discussion of this, a delay of this vote. If not, I will vote no. I'd like the public and the advocates have a chance to weigh in, at least to be heard by the board as what they think should be the priorities in terms of capital. And I think we have to take seriously that while it seems immaterial, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, that this is a major expenditure and a major expansion of cost. So I will vote no. Thank you.
Saul, and then Mr. Greenberg.
I think the debt is something that we have to really worry about, especially now. You know, we've been in a period in this country where interest rates have been falling steadily until it hit rock bottom. And frankly, we've been financing a lot of our debt with way below normal interest rates. And nobody knows where that's going to go. It's going to depend on the strength of the economy and what happens, but there's no question that we are now in a period of rising interest rates. How fast, how deep, how high, nobody knows, but our debt is going to cost more a year from now and a year from that, I believe, than it is currently costing us. So you got a time bomb here. It's really a problem. Not only do you have the $5 billion more in debt, but you are going to have I think, a substantial increase in carrying costs. And instead of being, what was it, Veronica, 20% of our expenditures, this thing could really skyrocket, so it becomes a huge problem for us. That also being we are faced with some slowdown in the real estate tax revenue here, which is, you know, I've seen it go from $200 million on the low point in 2009, where it really, we almost crapped out because of that, up to 1.5, 1.7 billion, where we were, you know, spending plenty of money here. So this is really a serious problem that, and I don't see, you can talk about it all you want, but I don't think it's going to be solved. The only way this thing could be solved is if the president gets through his big infrastructure plan. That could be a thing that could really take some pressure off us, a federal plan. Other than that, I don't think the state can afford it. I certainly don't think the city can afford it, and certainly the counties, you know, can't afford this. Second of all, spending. I've talked twice now at this meeting about spending. I took a lot of time on it, but I think it's really important because we have to make sure we get value for the dollar that we spend here. And it really scares me when we start doing sole source and things that are sole source because of time constraints and all these things, because I think that there's no question that contractors and everybody else that does business here sees a fat cat and takes advantage of us. And we have to be sure as fiduciaries of this board that we watch every nickel we spend. And I'm serious, and we can't afford not to have a top purchasing agent in this place. We can't afford not to have a really good capital construction person here that watches these contracts when they go out. And I think that's a responsibility of ours, and a real serious one, that the public's money is wisely spent. Third thing, I hope that this plan, and it's been my history, I've been here a long time, as you all know, we've always amended the capital plan. There's always been amendments, some major, some minor, and I think as we go on in discussions, I think a lot of people here are not, I think there's some very good things in here, like the third track on Long Island. I support that. I think that's really important with all the money we spent, you know, for Grand Central, bringing the Long Island Railroad into Grand Central. But there are some things in here I think are questionable, and some things that are not getting enough money, like station revitalization. I mean, I think that's something we really have to look at. I don't think that the stations, including the Westchester stations and the Long Island, I don't know Long Island well, but the Westchester stations are starting to deteriorate. And I think we have to look at this part of the plan and make sure we have enough money in there for capital for the transit and the suburban stations, which are really not in good repair and really are disgraceful in a lot of respects. So I hope we have the ability to really discuss this thing and do some amendments where necessary as we go along. But I will vote yes on this plan. I think it's the responsible thing to do.
Mr. Greenberg.
On this amendment, I think there are some very important things in this amendment, even new items in it, such as third track, mainline third track. The money for that, I think that's extremely important, not just for Nassau and Suffolk, but also for Queens. It'll allow for reverse commuting from Queens to Nassau and Suffolk. I think that's extremely important for all the counties on Long Island for economic health. My main concern, of course, is the debt, as Commissioner Vanderpool pointed out. I've always been concerned with the level of debt our agency has, and I don't think it's a short. The issue with this is almost never a short-term issue. We get through the capital program. It's just, what about the next capital program? Where's the money for that going to come from? We come up to that, and then it's like, oh, we need a new funding source. And people say, well, there's so much funding going to the MTA. Where's it going? Well, this is where it's going. So 4 years from now, when we're looking at, or 3 years, when we're looking to fund a new capital program, the answer is here and now of why there won't be money. I just want to make sure that's clear, and why the MTA will need yet another new funding source to fund the next capital program, because we bonded against all our revenue. And whether we have fixed, the 30-year fixed year, and we don't have to worry about interest rates, and that's fine, and that's great. And we've managed to be very economical and tighten our belts. That's great too, and we have more money. But if the governments don't pay now for our increased capital costs, that we're going to come up again against a problem 3-4 years from now. So as long as that's in the record and people know about it, I think it's okay and we should go ahead with this. Thank you.
Mr. Pally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to vote yes on this proposal for a number of reasons. People would think that the only reason I'm going to vote yes, being a suburban member, is third track. And while third track is important to those of us on Long Island, it is only one small piece of what I believe is to be a very balanced program among all of our entities. While all of us come from different places, and I have felt this very strongly, and I've been on this board 12 years, while I represent the people of Suffolk County on this board, I am not the Suffolk County representative. I am an MTA board member. And that responsibility goes beyond Suffolk County, goes beyond Nassau County, it goes to all the different parts of the region. When Metro North had a problem a couple of years ago, we all pitched in and made sure they had the resources necessary and the management necessary to do what was right. This program, from the capital side, provides substantial benefits to the subway and bus system in the city of New York, something which is essential to this community and essential to this region, far beyond what it might do for my residents in Suffolk County. Because unless we move people in the city of New York and move them around, and some of those people are mine and some of those people are John's, and some of them are Susan's and some of them are whatever, the system does not work. And when part of the system doesn't work, all of the system doesn't work in that regard. We all wish, I understand the debt issue, I understand the longer-term ramifications, but in my opinion, this is so important to do now, we cannot not do it. We all wish we had Superman to come down and wave his wand and say, we fixed everything. Or I have to be in modern times, as my granddaughter now says, Papa, Wonder Woman to come down and fix everything. We don't have that. What we have are all of us, our expertise, the management of this system. We are the ones in control. We shouldn't have to wait for anybody else to tell us what to do. We are the ones who have the responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility to this region, to our commuters, our residents, to do what is right. This amendment is what is right from a capital program standpoint. I'm hopeful that we have enough operating money to do what is right in the short term, especially on the subway system, which needs immediate help in some regard. And while I applaud the $20 million plan from last week or 2 weeks ago, I'm not sure that's enough. And if we need more money to do that, we should find it, whether out of reserves or something else, to do the short-term issues that are needed. And combining the two, I am hopeful we'll be able to take care of these issues in a reasonable and forthright manner. And that's why I'm going to support this resolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Commissioner Trottenberg. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Albert first. He raised his hand, and then Commissioner Trottenberg.
I'm going to agree with most of what has been said today, even though that is not in agreement with each other. Yes, this is an expensive plan. Yes, our debt service is growing. I think I heard Freddie at one meeting ask, what is the highest amount that you would expect debt service to be? And I heard the 20% figure. You don't want to go above 20%. At this point, we're not. I think Commissioner Saul's idea of smarter procurements will help us keep the price down. But if we don't do some of the things that are in this capital program amendment, they're going to get more expensive as time goes on. The longer we wait, we have found things get more expensive. If we wait on the R211s, if we wait on Long Island Railroad 3-track, those things are going to get more expensive. I think We have a commitment from Executive Director Haycom that the board will get involved earlier, that we can review elements of the capital program before they are presented to us. In fact, we can review this again, as Commissioner Pally has suggested, that we all be involved in looking at the capital program, see if we agree with some of these things, and if we don't, we can always submit another amendment. So while I don't have a vote, I would urge that we get this vote done today and then review the capital program and see if we all agree with the items that are in it, and maybe we have some individual suggestions from our respective regions. Thank you.
Commissioner Trottenberg.
I want to, I think, echo a lot of the comments I think my colleagues have made. I particularly want to focus on something David said, which I think is probably, I think, the city's biggest frustration today. Not only, I think, not enough time for all of us to really understand what's in a pretty large and complicated capital plan, but not an opportunity to, I think I'm looking at the people in this room, the journalists who cover the MTA, the advocates, the public, to the budget experts, to let them be part of the discussion. We are making a lot of big decisions today about the debt load this agency's on, the new capital projects we're taking on, which we all support. We agree there's some terrific projects on the list. You know, some of the things we're doing on the issue that I heard Mitch speak about, which I appreciate, which is what are we doing to ensure more capacity and better reliability on the subway system. I'll admit that some of the money I see moving around, I don't know that I even totally understand what we're getting at there, and so I want to reserve some judgment on it. But, you know, one thing as board members, I think probably the two most important things we do are deliberate and vote on capital plans and fare and toll increases. And you know, we talk about procurements and other things, but some of that's just agency business, and I think the agency mostly just needs to do it. But this is where we represent, and I appreciate what you say, Mitch, not only our geographic constituents, but this agency, as fiduciaries, as people that are worried about future generations. You know, that said, I think it's fair what you're saying, Andrew. You know, there's a reason to get this to move on, and we appreciate we've had some good discussion with the leadership here, a chance to have a better process going forward where I think members of this board can feel like they really understand what's in the capital plan. Now, you know, we're trying to today all kind of go back and forth on what it actually does, and I for one, am not sure that I totally know what it does. I'd like to feel that I did know that way before I vote on it. So for today, I'm actually going to abstain, but I'm hoping if we have further discussion and we come back with changes, then it'll be something that we can support in a full-throated way.
Mr. Schwartz and then Mr. Wartendijk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I just want to make a few comments, and it's been alluded to before. You know, this board has adopted a capital budget, and when you have a capital plan, that's exactly what it is. It's a plan. It's a roadmap. That plan is an evolving document, and that plan can change. It can change because of a natural disaster. It could change for a whole host of reasons. Yesterday, I, along with many other board members, had the opportunity to listen to the governor's presentation about how he wants to lead the transit system in the 21st century by modernizing it and making the service much, much better. And he came up with a very, you know, great idea. There's the Genius Initiative, which is genius, I think, in and of itself. And there'll be, I believe, great ideas that are going to come from this initiative. And based on that, there may be things that come out of that the board is going to want to support in terms of amending this capital plan. But there's many, many, many things in this thing that are very important, not only to the system itself, but for the people that use the system. And any delay would be unfair to them. This budget and this plan has been out there in public for a long time. I've read a lot of stories. So I don't think the reporters who cover the MTA are surprised by anything, since I read about most of the stories, whether it's phase 2 is Second Avenue subway, third track, the acceleration purchase of new subway cars and buses, increasing technology, open road tolling. Everyone on this board, people in Albany, people in New York City, will always have the opportunity to provide input and suggest amendments or changes to this program. But for right now, it is critical that we move forward with these amendments. I'm supporting it, and I look forward to its passage. Thank you.
Yes, after listening to all my constituents here and also Mr. Larry here, I'd like to just vote yes. And I know that things can be changed, but I think all in all, with all the moving parts that we've got and so many people and opinions, that we should really vote yes for this and then look to the future.
Anyone else? Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to vote yes. I've been listening very intently to the conversation, and I've been listening very intently to the conversations that have been going on around this table for most of the period of time I've been sitting here. And I've been trying to watch and I've been trying to learn as much as I can about the system and about the MTA so I can discharge my duties effectively. I've come to the conclusion that mass transit is the single most important supporting element of the economic system in the most important economic region in our entire country. This region relies on mass transit. If we don't have it, we just simply are no longer the economic center of the country. If you look at New York, and you look at other great cities in the world, particularly in China, you see that the rate of expenditure on infrastructure improvement, expansion, modernization, so far outstrips what we're doing that it's just remarkable. We are not spending money or planning on spending money on massive expansion, massive modernization, and all those things that are necessary to make sure that our region remains the economic center of gravity in the United States and one of the preeminent economic centers of gravity in the world 50 years from now. In my opinion, the pink elephant in the room is just money. We can't bond our way to the things that we have to do. We can't raise the fares to the things that we have to do. And the simple fact of the matter is that we get our money only from a few places. We get it from the feds, which is indirectly as tax dollars. We get it from fares, and we get it from bonding. At some point, I would like to think that we're all going to sit down, not as a board, but as New Yorkers, and have an adult conversation about the fact that if we want to remain the most important economic region in the city, if New York is going to remain the great world-class city it is now, that we're going to have to figure out how to spend more money, and when I say more, I mean lots more money, to expand and modernize our mass transit so it meets everybody's needs. And that can only come from one place, and I hate to say it, but it's probably taxes. And I think at some point that's a conversation we're going to have. I support bonding this because I don't see any other way for us to meet our obligations. But I do think that one of the things we've all got to think about is not just how we get through this next period, but what we're going to be doing for the long term.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Dr. Metzger.
Well, I'm tempted just to call the vote, but I do have a few comments. Like Mitch, I've been here for 12 years. I've seen the ups and the downs. I've appreciated the fact that the board members, aside from occasional problems, have always viewed themselves as taking responsibility not only for the subways, which are huge, but also even for my little 96-mile-long train that goes up into places that always seem so different from here. We are one region with a consolidated metropolitan transportation authority, and I'm always proud of us when we are able to talk out our differences. Money is the issue. It's always the issue. It's where we're going to get it from and how we're going to divvy it up. But the thing I've seen over the 12 years being here is that this agency is capable of saving vast amounts of money. Much of the money that we have now came from savings that we've made over time. And I truly believe that there's still lots of savings to come. We aren't going to get all the money we ask for, but we can help by operating more efficiently in everything we do. And I ask that we continue those efforts, because I think that in the long run is what gains us the authority to be the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. So obviously, I will vote yes.
Thank you, Dr. Metzger. Anyone else? If there is no other discussion, are we ready for a vote? And may I ask by a show of hands to let our recorder have an easier time of it. The chair, all in favor, the chair votes yes. Opposed? Have you got all that? All right. Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you very much. Before we adjourn, I would like to go back to the public session and have Mr. Morello continue to call the names of those who have registered.
I'm aware of two more speakers, Mr. Chairman. If you're out there and I don't call your name, please let us know that you registered earlier. First, Alexis Batista. Mr. Batista, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I feel very honored of being here and talking in front of you. First of all, I say sorry. I apologize for everyone that was here and we were screaming. I think we're not screaming because of whatever. Is what we go through. And I'm not here to bury accessory. I'm just here to give maybe two ideas of how it make it better. One of them is we disabled and we have to wait 30 minutes for them. If they late, we have to wait up to 30 minutes. But if we are late, they only wait for us 5 minutes. 5 minutes is nothing. Even in the elevator, taking the elevator takes sometimes 5 minutes going down. And sometimes I have an emergency and I don't have time because they say 3 hours to cancel the appointment. And if I have an emergency, I have a stomach and then I have to use the bathroom, then I lose, then they give me 1 penalty. If I get 3 penalty, they give me 3 months without accessory. What I'm gonna do in that 3 months? I go to school, I go to Lehman College. Most of the time I get to school late. My professor is telling me, Ale, you need to be more responsible. You cannot come here at this time. It's not my fault. It's accessorized fault. You understand? Things like this is like what we're complaining. So one second thing that I don't like about accessorized is that you're waiting for them in front, they are late, and when they come, they just go right real fast on the street. They don't stop. And then they say he was not here. That's another penalty. But I was there. He didn't took his time to stop. So this is the last thing. So what is the solution that I'm thinking? If the driver knows a lot of traffic and he knows he's going to be late, why don't you call the dispatcher and you tell the dispatcher, look, send another bus, send another car because I'm going to be late. That's my idea. Thank you for listening and you have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Batista, and thanks for waiting to speak. We appreciate it. I think our final speaker is Jason Pinheiro.
Good afternoon, people. Mr. Soul, where are you? I need to see you because your recent comments were so unresponsible. And I see that you're a coward, that you don't want to show your face to this very concerned rider of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. And I see that James Varello left too. Why he left? We don't know the answer. But obviously they're scared because I asked them to step down of their posts. But I see people like Veronica, Andrew, Mitch, David Jones, and others that have my support. But one question remains. Where is the leadership? Right, Freddie? Right, Ronnie? I've been asking this question since Tom Prendergast left office. I can respect you, Freddie and Ronnie, but you guys have to step up to the plate. Be more transparent. Be more like Tom Prendergast. Because the agency that you guys running has been going downhill. But at the same time, I'm very sad of seeing Dr. H leave. Dr. H, I admire your work. I hope that you enjoy your retirement and you will be missed. But next month's meeting will be happening on a very special day for me, my 31st birthday. I hope, Freddie, that you keep your promise, that you told all of those users of Accessorize to address that issue. I'll be here that day, and I hope that we have answers then, because if not, I'll be very disappointed, and I'll demand Mayor de Blasio and Governor Cuomo to step up to the plate, because it's not fair that we pay the consequences of your mishandling of the situation. So thanks for letting me speak at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Thank you very much. Just to be safe, are there any other persons in the audience who registered this morning to speak who have not been called upon? There you go, Mr. Schumer.
Bill Cole, anyone? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor. But before we do, let me thank my colleagues very much for the usually thoughtful comments they all made, whether on one side or another. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, the folks who are watching the live stream of this meeting, and I'm sure there are a legion of them, probably heard the term $43 billion in debt as a result of the new approved capital plan and thought, that doesn't sound very good or like smart accounting. Can you explain in lay terms for people who ride the subways and the trains why that's an okay way to economically proceed here?
There are some of us who believe it should be more than 43. We have a measurable need, a demonstrable need for more rolling stock, more subway cars, more buses, better buses. Our fleet is aging. I don't have to tell that to anybody who is on a C train, for example, or on the soon-to-be replaced Staten Island Rapid Transit Railroad. These are things we have to do, and we have to do quickly. We also have to add capacity, because when we talk about running trains closer together, you have to have the trains to run closer together and the ability to run them close together safely. So it includes all of that, including important upgrades and updates for our commuter rail system, Long Island Railroad, third track, second track main line, as well as improvements to Metro North.
The point being, though, doesn't that debt mean that down the line riders are going to have to pay for it?
Of course it means that. And it also means the state, federal government step up as well. I think Andrew Albert mentioned a very important benchmark. And he recalled a discussion that I had had with other board members at another board meeting, perhaps last year, where we were discussing additional debt. All of us who've been involved in public budgeting in the city and state side will recall there's a benchmark, 20% debt service. Once you're getting there, you're really worried. We're not there yet. Now, do we have to borrow if we want things? We absolutely do. Are we ready to do that? And do we have the capacity to do that? Yes, we do.
Mr. Chairman, yesterday, Governor Cuomo.
A long time.
It has, yes.
Yesterday, Governor Cuomo came out with more suggestions in what to do in regards to the situation with the Amtrak repairs at Penn Station. Governor Christie also mentioned things that they plan to do. We're still waiting to hear from the Long Island Railroad. Give me a situation where that stands now, and does it also include running some Amtrak trains into Grand Central?
We are still examining the impact of what we understand from Amtrak on our Long Island riders. We'll be ready to come out with that, including responding to Amtrak's request for track space at Grand Central in the next few days. And when we're ready to do that, everybody will know well before they'll have to make any plans for the summer.
Hi, Chairman. So last week, the MTA came out with your six-point plan to help quell delays. But then Cuomo yesterday said, announced the Genius Award. I'm just wondering, you guys have a lot of talent here. Is it insulting, or how do you feel about the fact that, he's looking for outsiders to come in and try to fix these problems now?
I welcome it. We can benefit from stepping outside of the box of our own thinking and planning on a great many of these projects. So I'm very happy that the governor did it. He's taking the lead on it, taking the lead on Penn. And believe me, those are problems no rational politician runs toward. They run away from. He's running toward them, and I give him an enormous amount of credit for it, and we want to stand there with him and applaud that leadership. On the Genius Awards, I think it's the right thing to do. Look, we took years to implement on the A division, the numbered lines, countdown clocks. Everybody loves it. It's the right thing to do. It gives people the information they need. If we had done the same technology for the B division, the lettered lines, Governor Cuomo would be right. None of us would be around for that. But in fact, we did something out of the box and different. And that's up and running. So why can't we do that with CBTC? Why can't we do that with a variety of other things that we undertake to try to make our rides safer, more reliable, and more responsive to our riders' needs?
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Following up on the Long Island Railroad question, Christie announced yesterday that New Jersey Transit would be discounting fares. While Cuomo is saying that this is going to be the summer of hell for Long Island Railroad commuters, are there similar plans being discussed to discount fares for Long Island Railroad riders, and how confident are you, just a few weeks away from the start of these service outages, that the Long Island Railroad will have a plan in place that accommodates riders?
Well, I think you heard the governor yesterday, I was there as well, address the reduction of tolls and the elimination of certain tolls on the Long Island Expressway. I think you also heard him express, and we have as well, that we'll be redirecting some trains away from Penn toward areas where they can disembark and get on our subway system. So we're doing that, and cross-honoring tickets. We're doing all of that. And we'll have more announcements as they are appropriate and then they're ready.
Good afternoon. Wanted to get your response to 2 points of criticism I heard from the board members about the 6-point plan, one of which is several of the points on that plan are things the MTA had already been doing to seemingly no noticeable improvement, and the other is that the spending, the $20 million to spend on repairing some equipment was not enough. I wanted to get your response to that, and now, and relatedly, now that we're some years out of the Great Recession, why isn't the MTA moving to reverse all the recession-era cuts in service now that ridership is booming?
Let me do your first question first, because it's sort of a complex layering of questions. On the first one, we're convinced that some of the things we tried previously that are reiterated in this 6-point plan for different lines in different areas will be successful. If the money we have appropriated is insufficient, we will look for ways to make it sufficient. But we are committed to these improvements. Now, the second question you asked, again?
Sure. I wanted to ask if there's any discussion about restoring the recession-era cuts, the 2009 doomsday budget. Is there any effort in the MTA to reverse those cuts now that the economy has improved since the Great Recession, and if not, why not?
We've been doing that for several years, certainly the 6 years I've been on the board, where we've been reviewing those service reductions, adding to them, changing them, reevaluating them where they are necessary. Perhaps less service is needed here, more service is needed there, and we've done that with pretty good success.
Follow up, do you have a ballpark range of how much of those, that doomsday budget cuts, how much has been restored?
I can't tell you that off the top, but I'll get that answer for you.
Yeah, putting aside a lot of the shouting that happened earlier in the day, in what ways?
The Bronx, come on.
In what ways can the MTA improve the accessorized thing? And some of the suggestions were brought up today, including absorbing it into the taxi system. Do you have any preliminary reactions?
Look, I'm unhappy with Accessoride too. I think the board doesn't have a complete level of contentment with how we provide that service, and hasn't for quite some time. So we're actively discussing how we improve that, but that discussion didn't start an hour or two ago. It's been going on a while. And we want to have some ideas ready for our next meeting, but we are intent on changing that and making it better.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. I have a question.
And I saw his lips moving, but I heard your sound. I was confused for a moment.
I have a question about the amended capital plan. These documents are very, very important documents for the future direction of the agency and for the millions of people that use it. I was just wondering, a document of this length, I understand it's just short of 200 pages, that hardly anybody in this room has seen, and that the board members
have.
You have, but I haven't, and none of these people here have seen it. It's not available on the website. I've asked for a copy of it. I've been told that it should be available later today, but I don't know if it will be. As far as I can tell, many of, if not all of the board members only were given a copy on Monday. Can you explain why a document of this importance would be presented at such short notice and then voted on, and why it wasn't held off for, say, another month so that board members and the public could have a chance to actually look at it, assess it, and weigh in on it?
Let me first say that the fact that this was not on our website, I think is bad. I've let people know in our leadership that I don't think that's right, and something like this should have been on our website in the interest of transparency. However, not one of these items comes as a secret to anybody who has been paying attention. We know about third track. We've been discussing it for how long? We've costed it out for how long? New car acquisition. We've done that as well. So this is not a secret. This wasn't sprung on an unaware public just an hour or two ago. That's I can't agree with that characterization.
Mr. Acting Chairman, we don't have a chairperson. We have an interim executive director. We have a lot of questions. So simple, who's in charge here?
Ronnie Hakam and I are both in charge. That, because of the operation of law, that position has split for now. My hope is that it will come back together when the governor makes a recommendation, a nomination to the state senate. My hope that will be soon, because you might remember from the last time I was acting chairman, I didn't want it to last all that long. I have a similar hope and aspiration these days. Not that I won't miss these moments in my life or yours, but I think we need to go to something else.
I just wanted to add to the accessoride question. A lot of the people that came sort of braved the accessoride system to get here, and they left before they got to speak. What would you say to those people that left about the MTA? They feel like they already can't voice their concerns and were cut off today. So do you have any other words for them?
I asked them to remain. I guaranteed them that we would remain to hear every last one of them. We came back, and we were ready to call their names. We asked, you know, look, if they decided to go, we had to also deal with, I think, their very legitimate concern that the accessoride vehicles would leave them behind. Our staff went into action immediately to make sure their rides were there. We would take them wherever they needed to go, whenever they needed to go. So I want to let the riding public know that we were here for as long as they were here, and we would have listened to every last one of them. We heard, by the way, about 25 of them before we got to our agenda. I don't think anyone around would suggest that that agenda was in some way trivial or unimportant. We had to deal with it, and then we came back to a very important concern with our riding public, and I was prepared to remain until 6 p.m. This evening or 6 a.m. tomorrow morning to listen to every one of them. Thanks.